Okay, let's see here. Let's see if we can get this rascal. Gonna let me do it. Well then. Apparently not gonna let me. Alright, well I was gonna share it. I guess I'll have to do it afterwards. Hey kids, what's going on? As you can see in the title, we're gonna talk about separation of powers. This goes to a conversation we had a little earlier. Um, I know you've heard we've been talking a lot on the show about these corporate bureaucracies and the swamp and the bar association and all these contracts and policy, and it's really confusing. And I understand your question. So I'm going to try to kind of break this down for you kids a little bit. So kind of give you an idea of what I used to do for a living is when I worked in the private sector, remember, managing private sector emoluments, profit margin, capital gains, and market advantage. I worked as a vendor or as the primary vendor in for um, what our company used was this program called uscommunities.org. Okay. And what this was it's more or less like an Angie's List um, for government entities to shop and buy whatever materials they need for their job. Like in my case, if it was the school board and they needed filters for their parts for the school buses, they would call your dad. So just kind of give an idea. Or the police cars, they needed brakes, they'd call, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So um, this is, kind of how I was able to recognize all of this when I started to see it. Now, of course, over the years, um, remember we talk about how things mirror each other. This starts to look like this, and you can start to recognize it. Well, again, knowing that all of the work that I did throughout the course of my career was always handed over to bar members, right? Here, go check and see if that's legal or lawful or whatever the hell it is you guys do with it. And turned out I just thought they were going to, make their legal documents and go submit it. They were just putting a cover page on it, calling it their work and dropping it into the court, the dirty bastards. So, but anyway, it's neither here nor there. The point is when we talk about the separation of powers in government, okay, the Constitution is written on the legislation has a job, the executive has a job, and the judiciary has a job. Okay? When we talk about bar members and the practice of law and how it's perverted itself over the course of time. Now, one of the things that we found out in our particular case when I really put the arm on Mike DeWine, the AG from Ohio, said, I want you to go get a warrant to go search Judge Rentala's private cabinet and get me my report. Right? Remember that report? I've been on them like white on rice for that for how many years? Of course, I've since gotten it. So, but anyway, it took how many years for me to do that? So, I did. I sent them formal notices and demand letters through the legislator. Blah 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 blah. I finally got a notice back from him, from their office, that says we are part of the executive branch. Okay, so if the prosecutor is part of the executive branch, now when you think about enforcement of the law, that makes sense, right? Because that's what the executive branch's job is. So when we talk about separation of powers, how is it that these active bar members, okay, they're officers of the court, right, by definition, So then how are they cutting over this separation of powers and putting themselves in the legislature as they're still practicing in the executive branch? Right? So when you think about this, it's so simple. It's so simple. It's stupid. But again, because many of us, myself included, I was busy at work. I mean, hey, ask someone else now, right? That's what that means. But the, I'm out there busy saying, hey, do the school buses need parts? Do the police cars need parts? Do the fire trucks need parts? That was my job, right? I'm like everybody else, assuming that this thing is working the way it's supposed to be working. It's been there for 230 years. Why the hell would I think it's not working? Right? Well, again, we can read Agenda 21, which I posted for you guys. And then, of course, one of my favorite books, 1984, which I'm getting ready to read again. But there's a reason that my corporations wanted me to read that shit, because they knew the day was going to come where these these things were going to grow, and there was only one entity. The global New World Order was going to actually attempt to pull this off, right? Because before it was all speculation, and we just laughed about it. It was like, oh yeah, bullshit. They'll never get away with it. Well, in recent history, right, since the computer and the invention of AI, and these guys actually started believing their own bullshit, right? So that's basically how it all became one entity. And the thing about this bar mechanism is it is way the hell out over here, right? Doesn't even it's not even in here anywhere, right? So when we talk about these foreign actors, and you'll hear people online talk about, and they have to register and they have to go through all these long processes and blah blah blah. I'm going to skip all of that because that's way above you kids' head. You're teenagers, so let's just leave all the technicalities out of it and just say this is the foreign entity, right, that you've heard us all talk about. So when we actually read the Emoluments Clause and go through the history, excuse me, the definition on page 638 in the Black's Law Dictionary, believe it or not, is actually true when you go through the history. So this is what makes it so dangerous, and why these actors in their word salad become dangerous, because just like in our cases where they only tell you bits and pieces of a story, right? I'm going to give you a bit over here and a chunk over there and maybe a little piece over here and a chunk over there. Never give you the whole picture, which is a lie by omission. And of course, a lie by omission is still a lie. But, so we can go through and look at their actions and see where these people have told on themselves just over the course of time through their practices. So when we go through acts like the Declaration of Independence and we read those declared acts of tyranny, we say, hey, these are declared acts of tyranny. Why are you doing this shit like a checklist? Well, because these guys were what we declared independence from, and they're the ones that knew how to do all of that crap. So again, that's the reason we're having this same problem over and over and over again. So when we talk about the original language of the original 13th Amendment and why that was, carefully rewritten during the War of 1812, as you've heard us talk about that on the show more than once. So, what that was supposed to do was eliminate this, right? Here's a problem. And when we talk about who is supposed to be managing this, Well, the answer was, depending on the situation, time is we the people, right? So now, are there things that we brought with us, from that mechanism when we left it? Absolutely, right? For example, we pick up and we look at the legislative law process, for example, and there were certain things about it that we wanted to keep. We wanted to keep things like the 10 principles that govern procedure in group making or group decision making, right? That was part of our ideology, part of our culture. So when we talk about, oh yeah, like number 9, there must be no fraud, trickery, or deception resulting in injury to another member. So when it says that to another member, why is it saying to another member instead of saying to a party? Because another member of we the people, right? That's what that means. So remember, we're not supposed to actually have, technically speaking, an alphabet soup. We're not supposed to have all of these agencies, right? This was just the way that the legislature over the course of time said, well, we're going to manage things like deviant behavior that was handled in the church, right? And of course, you've got all these other religions out there saying, well, I'm not part of your church. I'm not part of that system. And the legislature at the time said, well, yeah, freedom of religion. Duh. So 1789, they came up with this judiciary, right? And they came up with put in the Judiciary Act 1789. And that was kind of like where the wheels fell off of the wagon, right? Because here we went again, and we, like dumbasses, we let these dumbasses back into our country again, right? So, and of course, the rest was history. Now, when we talk about where we are in the here and the now, okay, I actually have definitive proof in the form of a letter where Attorney General Mike DeWine says, well, I'm part of the executive branch. Okay, so you're part of the executive branch. That doesn't, you can say you can go get a warrant to search John Jones's house for, I don't know, pick drugs, just for the sake of argument. So you can take and you can create this thing called a warrant and go to a judge and get a warrant to go search John Jones's house for those drugs, right? Well, why can't you do that process, go see a different judge, and go get our report that's in a place where it's not supposed to be, right? Because it's supposed to be available for inspection in the record by we the people, right? So when we talk about we the people, this is where this comes from. So depending on what problem, now remember, when the Constitution was written, the founders were, we have no idea what this planet's going to look like in 200-300 years. So they said, well, we're going to keep this open to the legislature. So if people have any issues, they have to petition the legislature first, right? These are the representatives that we put into office to represent us as we the people. That's why they're pulled from we the people, right? It's just because we got so comfortable listening to their word salad and all their little fuzzy shit, and they're good at their powers of persuasion and their political correctness make me vomit. We literally just fell right back into that same, swamp right there, that same swamp that we left, right? Over the course of time, these corporate bureaucrats are also foreign actors, right? So we're looking at a thing now called Uranium One, okay? And what just surfaced was a pretty incriminating email thread between some pretty entrenched Department of Justice actors in the alphabet soup, right? Part of this branch, okay? And stay with me because this is going to be very key real quick here. So anyway, you have these corporate actors, right? Technically speaking, violating the emoluments clause because they are foreign actors like these guys, right? Following the same principles and practices, right? To work with the former administration to create these contracts to sell our, percentage of our uranium to foreign interest. Okay. So in order to hide that deed, what they had to do was they had to create this false narrative, right? To deflect the blame from that thing and say, hey, we're going to blame all of this on Trump, and we're going to say that Trump was the one who was colluding with the Russians, not us, when all of the time everybody knows it's all a bunch of hogwash. But this is one of the reasons where this gets really, really ugly is if you go to that definition, page 638, where they're trying to change the meaning of the word emoluments to something other than government, right? This thing here, to mean something you can charge the executive with if he does something you don't like. That's partially true in history, but the problem with it is the only ones who are guilty of this collusion they're talking about are the people that are throwing the allegations, right? So, again, this I saw because of what I went through with these exact same people in our case who managed to concoct a phony dossier about your dad in January, where supposedly my dad parts grew some 1,000 miles and reached from Florida to Ohio, which I still like to see how they pulled that one off because I must have been sleeping during all of that. Anyway, so going back to where we talk about our separation of powers is and why this is so critical. Over the course of time, the Supreme Court has actually said that you can't license the practice of law. You can't do it. And here's the reason why. We say on the show, for how many years we had law, right? Land, air, and water. Well, now we have laws, land, air, water, and space, right? So, we joke about it, but it's true. It's actually true. And so, in other words, because of as we've grown as a society and as human beings, we decided we wanted to explore space, right? It's no longer science fiction. It's science fact, right? So, again, what does the bar know about space? Not a damn thing. So if we're going to litigate something to do with space, we would need people who are skilled from going back to Sims v. Ahern's from 1925. I think this is the right spelling. Sims v. Ahern's 1925. Those justices were still aware. They were not aware of space yet, or we were going to do that, but they were still, it was still fresh enough in their minds that if we needed to solve a problem, whether it's prosecute a bad actor, settle a dispute of a contract, whatever the subject matter was, that needed to come from we the people, right? So, knowing full well that there's not one organization or monopoly that can be all things to all people. That's why we got rid of the bar, right? Because they were trying to keep up that same freaking argument, right? It's now that I see this from the perspective I see it, I can actually sit from a judge's perspective and go, how many times are you going to ask me the same damn question and in it with just different word salad, and I'm going to change my mind? Wrong, right? It's wrong. And that's the reason that there's a whole lot of discussion about this right now, is because, well, again, over the course of time, the medical field, accounting, hell, even hairdressers, real estate brokers, carpenters, we all have a stand. We pay for the privilege to be able to run our businesses and do our thing. So now again, it's going to come about, well, why can't we utilize this same defense mechanism while we practice our respective, right? See, because what I do is loss prevention, right? They want to call it law because they want to say, well, he's practicing law without a license. No, what I do is loss prevention. When was the last time you ever saw a lawyer use mathematics and calculus to make a legal argument? Never. So again, what I do and what they do, they are similar and they are based in the same principles. However, my methodology is totally different than theirs. So it ain't the same shit. And I don't care what they tell you, they're full of it. So I said, look, I will take and create this company, this thing I called eClause. It's over here on the wall. And I will limit myself to this specific subject matter of managing government emoluments under the premise of loss prevention, which is what I've always done right here, right? Well, this started to get noticed because without the modifiers, without the word margin, without the word market, and without the word capital, this is government, right? So we talk about Federal Reserve and ACH, and that's the epicenter and the Reconstruction Act, and it's all constructive fraud, yada, yada, yada. Yes, that's all true. It's all 100% what your dad and your grandpa call SMU. So that's exactly what that is. That's what we mean when we say shit made up right there. So, you see the problem here, and I understand this from the judge's perspective, because as far as they're concerned, if you're going to walk in their courtroom and you're going to practice anything, I don't care if it's a doctor, if it's an engineer, if it's a carpenter, if it's whoever, two things they want to know. Number one, are you skilled? Right? Can you do the job that you're saying you can do? And the second thing is, that said, where are you standing? Right? And then we get to why you're here, and then subject matter jurisdiction, because there's 7 elements to that. So, but they want to be able to say, and I understand their perspective, they want to be able to say, hey, I want to be able to have input on who is working in my courtroom and the methodology and how they practice whatever it is they're doing, right? So I, as a judge, can manage my own courtroom. So you see what I'm saying? This is where it becomes complicated, and I see that from their perspective. Again, in management, you have to be able to inspect what you expect, blah, blah. Well, in the beginning, that was fine because it worked off of a system that was more or less like a journeyman type of a thing. It was kind of like on the job training. You'd have your education, but you would literally shadow somebody and you would more or less learn on the job. So you would learn the etiquette, you would learn the language, you would, and so on and so on and so on. So, again, law schools replaced that mechanism, and this bar association decided it was going to say, well, John Jones, when you come out of law school, I want you to work here. What if John Jones doesn't want to work there? What if John Jones wants to work way over here? Well, no, because the law school says you have to work here. So John just went and paid how much money for law school, and now he's stuck in a job that he hates, right? So again, seeing this from multiple angles, the way I do, that's my job. I see the inherent problems with the practice. So I was talking about this with Angela, Steve Ball, and Brian Lee last night on their show. It's kind of an interesting conversation. But the judges are saying, you know what? Maybe we need to be more proactive on who we let in our courtrooms. In other words, who really is skilled? So, for example, when I make an argument, when I write a document, I write it from the rules, and I've shown you guys in the shows how I do that. And yeah, obviously he's skilled in what he does. So they said they issued me this thing and called it a mandate. And they said, you stand here. You've obviously proven that you can do what you say you can do, even though we don't understand it. You've obviously proven that you can do it. So stand right there, right? This created a problem for all of those bar members, because now guess what happened? We showed them definitively that they had gone over again. They had returned back to their same bullshit. Go back to the Declaration of Independence and back to, this is where the Texas case came in. We said, hey, even in Texas, they even wrote it in their constitution. Monopolies and perpetuities are contrary to the genius of a free government. And it was like the light bulb came on, ding. So it was, wait a minute, these guys are actually talking about the Constitution, the law. Then they go back and they look and they see at the 2016 election and they look and they say, businessman. And they are talking about this mechanism, the we the people thing, right? Well, we don't teach that in law school. What the hell? So the question becomes, what the hell is it you're learning? Because if you're not learning the mechanism of we the people, how the hell can you claim you're practicing law or laws if you don't even know what the hell the damn thing says? And half of them, they wouldn't be able to recite it if their life depended on it. They'll go through cases, like nobody's business. And a lot of them are pretty damn good at that, right? So even this, why I said, even the good actors were like, hey, you know what? That's an interesting point. What the hell does the Constitution say? So we go back and we say again, you're not practicing law, because if you were practicing law, you would know one thing. You can't be in the executive branch practicing law as a judicial officer while serving as a legislator at the same time. Right? That's that separation of powers. So I understand that's kind of a long-winded explanation of it, but that's really the best way I can kind of explain it to you kids, that, kind of without going through all 230 years of history, but in a way that I think you can pretty much wrap your heads around how the swamp got created, what corporate bureaucracy and this outside bar mechanism. And there's a couple other things I wanted to go over with you too. And a good thing I remembered it. In corporations are governed by what we call policy. Okay? Now, what would be the purpose of a policy? All right. Example of governance through policy. In my job, we have, a situation that kind of looks like this. We have our board of directors, we have our CEO, and then we have our brick and mortar. And in order to run these things, the things that the people see, the brick and mortars, there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on within the rest of this corporation. It's its own swamp, right? So it's got its associated bullshit, right? Same as every other, Congress, group of monkeys with its head monkey, right? And so those of us who are down working in the trenches, we come across different problems, and I've used this one in the past, so I'll repeat it because I know you've heard me talk about it, is we found in the community that we had a mess out there that we needed to clean up in the form of old, used, and, just dead lead acid batteries, car batteries, right? So we had to create a mechanism that we wanted to go around. We wanted to police ourselves in our own industry, right? And because at that time there was a lot of legislation and a lot of talk about the CAFE standards and vehicles polluting and yada yada yada. So again, we went through, and ironically, you guys are gonna laugh. When we decided we were going to do this, the first question we asked ourselves was, do we really have the authority to do this? Because we're going to be going on other people's property. And of course, the general consensus, even from the lawyers, was, well, if they give you permission, yeah, I don't see why it would be a problem. So we're like, okay, we have authority. Okay, good. So ironically, number one in the Masons Legislative Manual, a group must have the authority to take the action it purports to take. Didn't require any jurisdiction. It just was like, can we actually do this? Well, even the attorneys said, even the lawyers said, oh yeah, why not? So, and of course the rest of almost a mirror image. Again, that mirror image of how those things just kind of managed to, duplicate each other, whether they realized it or not. It's just strange that we would meet after all this time. And so we created a policy, a process, right? And it was it would help, I would learn how to spell, a policy which outlined a process on how we were going to do this, okay? And we took this proposal, took it to the board of directors and the CEO, right? And of course, we got permission and blah, 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 blah. And it was great for PR. So we were, governing ourselves and governing our industry. And we didn't need any law enforcement. We didn't need any regulation or legislative mechanism. That was an example of self-governance, right? So when you talk about law and the difference between what we did here and what's going on now is this was actually something that we did to, again, police ourselves, clean up the environment, blah, 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 blah. What these guys are doing in this deep state thing is they're trying to run our country, right, with these policy process documents. So when I wrote my parliamentary inquiry, right, which is a form of this, I sent it here, and obviously now that I have a mandate telling me to stand here, I sent a copy of it to these guys over here in the judicial. That was something I've never had to do before, right? So it was, okay, well, how do I construct a comprehensive question to the 9 Supreme Court justices of the United States, knowing full well that one of their own just went through the exact same problem that I did, right? So it's like, well, that's actually 2 ins, right? That's an in by subject matter and an in by being granted a position in standing, right? And what was like this policy where we were going after this subject matter, okay, here's what Dad did. Dad created this 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 policy process. And what was it designed to do? It was designed to, the bad effects of not enforcing perjury statutes. And what are statutes? Statutes are, again, as far as I'm concerned, not are they not legal, they're not lawful, but don't get me started. Statutes are basically, for lack of a better expression, they're like part numbers that govern the actors in government, right? So if you're an actor in government and you commit perjury under Title 18, it's Title 18's the 3571. That's a $5,000 fine. If you subordinate it, it's another $5,000. So between the two, perjury and subordination, it's $10,000 per occurrence, right? Per person. So, and this is where it gets tricky because, well, we didn't actually commit the lie, but you still subordinated it. So it's still $5,000 and it's still a trespass. It still taints the entire process and you're all still fired, right? And again, because there's no truth in the record. And what is that? Going back to the process here, group decision making. Why? Because there's a group of people in the room. There must be no fraud, trickery, or deception injuring another member. Well, not enforcing perjury statutes and not maintaining the truth in the record does, in fact, cause injury. But it wasn't just to your dad. Who was the real victim? And this is why when I came out and said the court is in disrepute for doing this, because part of the judge's oath is to protect Lady Justice, right? That's supposed to be their job. That's why we gave them the job, right? So, by them not enforcing perjury statutes, they've made Lady Justice the victim. Right there. And it was when I made that, I actually brought that before the court. That was when they issued me the mandate. This little rascal right here. So, because under the circumstances, everything, maxim of law, what is on the record ought not be denied. Had total proof that there's been nothing but lies, fraud, deception, and money mongering, the whole thing, because Dad does one of the things Dad does in his bits, right? So again, I just brought those skills to the court and showed them in loss prevention, we do audits, right? And it's not just the numbers. A lot of people, they think they see an audit and they're thinking, oh, they're auditing the profit margin, right? Well, wrong. There's more to a compartmentalized audit. One of the things that we review in those comprehensive audits, compartmentalized audits, is called a policy review, because through these policies, they create sometimes whether it's willful or not, they create these advantages, right, that lead to they're now unlawful emoluments. Why? Because that's the actual word in law. So, let's go back to our process here. And I know I've read that somewhere. To be valid, any action or decision of a body must not violate any applicable law or constitutional provision. Well, May 1st, their policy violated a constitutional provision in Florida. It's called Article 1, Section 11. And that's in the paperwork, so I won't read it I won't go over that, blow this out of the water. But because of that, they can't get through, and they blew it right there out of the water in number 10. That takes their entire mechanism and it taints it, right? Because it is not constitutionally compliant. And what is a real judge, a court of law? What's their favorite thing to do? Kill a bad case, right? And I'm going to tell you, there is a maxim of law that really goes in and explains this. Let's let everyone employ himself in what he knows. And yes, of course, old man proved that he knows loss prevention, forwards, backwards, left, right, upside down, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, what is illegal ought not be admitted under pretext of legality, right? So what happened on May 11th was they tried to enter in this unlawful action and claim that it was lawful. This thing called what they called capias, writ of attachment, capias bullshit. The only thing that those are lawful for is if somebody commits like bank fraud, right? A financial crime where they willfully went in and stole money, robbed a bank, created a bunch of false transactions that led to unlawful profit emoluments, blah, blah, blah. And wait a minute, who did that? Oh, again, let's go back through those policy documents that the Democrats wrote, and they're like, oh, there they are, right? So what happens to their entire process? Their entire process is now tainted, or fruit of the poisonous tree, right? So because we can show this, we can implement another maxim of law. A precedent accomplishes nothing if it settles one dispute by raising another. Okay, that's one of the that one right there is the best one you can give. If you want them to kill a case and kill it like right now, you throw that one at them. It's in the paperwork. So, matter of fact, I should be able to give you which document it's on here. I think it was on the state appellate brief, cover page to the state appeal. That's where it was. I will. Whoops. Yep, there it is. To the 2019 congressional session. Right? This rascal right here. See those 5 maxims of law right there? That middle one. That's what the middle one means. So, and again, it means a precedent accomplishes nothing if it settles one dispute by raising another. Well, the reason this case should die is because when they broke the law, Article 1, Section 11, terms and conditions of their contract that lets them keep their emoluments of their office, right? That actually what it did is it destroyed the integrity of process. Okay. Now, I'll tell you what, I'll just run through that real quick. We have in the private sector, if we want to test the integrity of a process, we have a methodology that we use to do that with. And I'm going to teach you kids how to do it. It's real simple. So, and I've done this before, so you'll recognize it. In the thing that we're measuring is emoluments. So we're just going to call that E, right? And we devise a formula, and the formula is, go ahead and use my colored pens here so you guys know what we're looking at. And E equals quantity over E equals quantity plus over. Okay, so we have advantage, profit, and gain. So you see how I did this? I took the three criteria: the advantage, the profit, and the gain, the things that create the three variables that make up what an emolument is, right? And I want to factor or test every one of them individually. Well, how do you do that? You divide them out of the equation, right? So in the first example of this, we would go advantage plus profit divided by gain, okay? This is the mathematical methodology on how to do it. And the second one is advantage plus gain divided by profit. And then we go profit plus gain divided by advantage. Okay? So I said this is real cool, and it's actually really easy to set this up. So in order to be able to test, you have one thing, right? But it contains three variables, right? And you want to make sure that every time you run this, right, in order to maintain the integrity of the process, right, and say that no matter how you do this, you're always going to come to the same answer, 1. Okay? So if you run this process through run it through all three ways, and you come up with an answer other than 1, or whatever the common, it could be 1 million for all I know, depending on what it is you're measuring. But if you don't come up with the exact same answer all three ways, there's no integrity of process. Again, this is a mathematical way to also explain that maxim of law that I just read to you. A precedent accomplishes nothing if it settles one dispute by raising another. So in other words, same thing for a judge, right? If they can't run a case through all three, right, when we're talking about government actors or a policy or a law or a statute or whatever, if it doesn't pass, and we'll call this the strict scrutiny standard for lack of a better expression, and it doesn't all the same equal this same number, it fails, right? It's tainted, whether it's tainted or whatever it is. The point is it doesn't meet the muster, and it can't work. And it definitely won't work, especially long term. Well, here's the danger of what happened over the course of time. They've managed to change this variable and manipulate it, these advantages, right? And call them legislation or these subcategories called statutes, right? And the reason that they call them statutes instead of bills of attainder is because not all of them are bills of attainder. Some of them are policies. Some of them are, related to rules. So, it's a way for them to take and literally change this emolument into something else to distract you from the real thing, right? So again, when I discovered this, they're talking about these agencies, these alphabet soups, right? CPS, DOJ, HHS, DOD, and so on and so forth, right? Well, again, as my licensing, This is called agency, right? Agency, right? So, yeah, screw my handwriting. It's terrible. But one of the things that we learn about agency is, and again, this is where my license comes in, what I cannot do in my person, I cannot do through the agency of another. So again, if I can't change these advantages, right? Why can't I do that? Well, let's see here. According to the Masons Manual, I don't have the authority to do that. Right there in number 1. Jurisdiction must be given if they do not have. Okay, that's the description under number 1. So because these groups of Democrats assumed that they had the powers to literally break up these advantages, right, and pass them around and become this political power, right? They've literally tainted the entire damn system. The system hasn't worked in, I bet you, more than 100 years. So, again, this is a serious problem. You know, this is the, oh shit, Houston, we've got a problem. And it's our fault. I mean, and I say I'm the first one to admit it. Instead of doing what I should have been doing, which was working with the legislature all the time and helping them manage this shit, I was busy doing shit that I was doing. Right? That's my dereliction of duty. Well, when I find an error, I can fix that, right? I can figure out how to take these little artificial circles, right? Get rid of them suckers, right? Them artificial advantages. One of these things just doesn't belong here. There we go. A little bit of Sesame Street action on them. So now we go back to the original the original equation. So we're back to, again, is the emolument of family court lawful? And the answer is no, right? Because family rights and civil rights have nothing to do with the establishment, support, or management of government. Kirk has been like a broken record on that, aptly so, because it's true. So, again, because we let these corporate bureaucrats and these bar actors, right? And here's another problem. For 230 years, all we had was this bar mechanism, right? And it's got everybody so pissed off and screwed up. They wouldn't, people wouldn't know good faith that came up and punched them in the mouth now. So now we've got this problem of, we have plenty of people out there who are very skilled, that are very good at what they do. But because people have been so screwed over, right? Now it's, they walk in, they become the Walmart shopper. They walk in and they say, okay, I can see that big screen TV works. I want to buy one. Here's the problem. The one you're looking at works. What about the one in the box? You didn't see that work. But they're not thinking. They're not thinking. So we have to retrain our brains to get back to what it was with the clean slate and be able to say, hey, if I'm going to do this job, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it to a high standard. And we're going to agree to what that high standard is. And we're going to create a process that, oh, wait a minute, we already did that. It's called the Constitution. Son of a bitch. So, again, that's why your cases, a lot of these cases, including Dad's, and it was my own damn fault, until recently, I had skipped not following due process of law and petitioning the legislature. Here's where it really gets hilarious. Now that we figured it out, Dad's friend John went and did this in Tennessee. And you know what happened? They went and the clerk of Congress actually said to him, the last time this was done in Tennessee was 1850 or 59. I forgot. We'll just say 1850 just because I think that's it. So again, we look at the Constitution and read what it says. Benjamin Franklin wrote, "It's a republic if you can keep it." If you can keep it. Who can keep it? That would be we the people. It's our job to keep it, not some bar member's job. Hell, it's not even their job, right? So again, that's why, the more we bring this stuff out and actually start saying, hey, we've all been bullshit. Me too. Me too. We talk about how some things happen with a sense of historical irony. Here's the problem for the judges. Now, when these bar actors come in and they say, "Oh, I'm going to 12b6 my way out of this," judge is going to be like, "Oh, no, you're not." You want to know why? Because once we've petitioned the legislature, we get a scope document, right? That's what we've been missing. Every one of us. And I can't believe I missed it too. So, pretty proud of myself that I was able to find that and teach you kids how to do it and how to do it properly, right? I keep telling you, if you're going to question authority, learn the process, right? I'll be the first one to tell you, be loud, be proud. Boisterous, a belligerent man has his rights, right? But you can be belligerent and respectful at the same time. This is the respectful way. This is why we got a scope document. And the first example of a scope document that I got was this rascal right here. This mandate. Why? Because the judges saw that I followed due process of law. Right? So I didn't have to just walk in and say, I can do this. I done proved it. Right? So that's why I said, the day is going to come. You kids are going to be back here, and we're going to go through all this stuff, and who knows? Maybe it'll be like it was when I was married to your mother, and I would come to the school with John and Brittany, and I would teach in their classes. I used to teach. Ask John, ask your brother, and ask just John and Brittany. They'll tell you. I used to come in and tutor the kids on math and history and science, and we had a good time. Taught them how to ride unicycles. Oh God, I think I was probably more of a bad influence on them than anybody. Guess what? Nobody got in trouble. Nobody got hurt. So, and everybody had a good time. So, on that note, I think that probably answers it. Separation of powers, right? We have to keep these bar actors the hell out of government because they don't belong there. So, anyway, on that note, I think that's pretty much done. And, oh, hey, what's going on, everybody? I was going to share this, but there ain't no share option in here for whatever reason. I don't know why. Yeah. Go down through some of the comments. Maybe I'll answer some of these for you kids. So, let's see. Why is this not working? on, mouse. You're killing me here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see here. We don't stand on. See, but right. You got that right. Stand on our rights. What's going on, Jamie? Yeah, there's Neely. Yeah, we need to. Yeah, you're right, honey. We need to open a Republic College. That's true. We need to teach what the Constitution says. Ben says that's why I posted that video. We need to teach. Go back to Schoolhouse Rock. And no, I'm not going to sing. So, all right. I'll go ahead and end this, and I'll just answer in the comments. Okay, guys. Love you. See you soon.